Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a very special episode brought to you in part by Belmont Watches here locally in San Diego. They were able to lend in these outstanding new Seiko SLA models. A little bit about Seiko. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And these are dive watches. Some key common characteristics in a dive when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. These are the Prospex SLA056, 066, and 067. Just for reference there, I made sure that each date matched so that we could do 5, 6, and 7. So if you ever have any questions, which one is which, all you have to remember is the SLA06, and then it's either the 065, 066, or 067. And these are 1965 Divers Modern Reinterpretation limited editions. Now, when we're talking about that 1965 diver, that was actually, the legendary 62 MAS. And this is essentially a mid-tier recreation of Seiko's first legendary diver. Except it's been bumped up a little bit and reimagined. So you're getting the premium 8L movement, as well as Zaratsu polishing and that Dia Shield super hard coating, whether it be in a gold tone or a black tone. So it's going to be protected either way. These are going to be in about the 40 millimeter range. So essentially what you're going to get is, something similar to, let's say, an SPB 143, but stepped up to kind of marine master grade quality. So that is definitely very, very nice, especially with that 8L35 movement, which is basically derived from the Grand Seiko 9S movement. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now before we dive in, I just figured it would be safe to put this in so you guys can get a direct comparison. And I will say, in terms of the size, in terms of the style, you're going to see a lot of these similar hallmarks from the SPB 143 here on these SLA models. Now, of course, this one was actually inspired by that same 62 MAS, but came out after the success of the now discontinued, because it was a very limited run of just 2,000 units, was the SLA017, which was more of just a reissue versus these being more of a recreation where they've updated and they made some changes, and some would even say some improvements. So I'm sure a lot of you have probably already seen this blue model, but it is gorgeous. This is probably the most popular of the bunch just because everybody loves a blue dive watch, and this thing is fantastic. Of course, these are all brand spanking new. Let me just wipe off some of the dust there. And loaned in from Belmont Watches, and all these watches are actually available for sale for purchase off of their site. Now, the blue and the gold model, the 65 and the 66, the MSRP at about $2,900, but you can get them for $2,800. So these two are going to come in around the same price, and I really like kind of the duality between them both. Obviously, same design, same strap and everything, but then very different colorways. The blue, of course, very nautical, and then you do have this gold tone, which definitely is a more tropical kind of gilt. There's something that's very kind of sun-baked about this gold, and also quite classic. So I really like that. And again, both available from Belmont Watches for a discount at $2,800 each. Now, kind of the odd child, the black sheep, is this nice night vision edition model in the SLA067. Now, these actually go for $3,100 MSRP, and you can get it for $2,850 from Belmont Watches. And it's going to come on this beautiful Seiko style strap, which I've never had a problem with the look of these straps, but they are a bit thick, so they do put a bit of space between you and, of course, your timepiece. But the good news is this is a thinner timepiece than some of the watches that they've previously put these on, so it's not quite as bad. But man, this is gorgeous. And you can see, even with that black coating, you still see that beautiful fine Zaratsu polishing there for that upper chamfer, as well as the undercut underneath being a polished tone. Of course, on here, it's going to be a little bit less evident, but when we take a look at, let's say, this gold tone model, you can see the beautiful shine that is there, that is actually really helping these watches just, again, really visually thin out their silhouette. Let me just give it a quick little wipe here. And again, you're going to see similar hallmarks that we saw on the SPB 143, because, of course, this was kind of... this is the, I guess, the affordable version. If you look and you see the similar chamfer, similar sizes, right? The main difference out of these two, if you put them next to each other, is going to be the dial spacing. So the dials of these watches, the newer SLAs, are a bit more expansive, as you can see. So they push everything a little bit more outward, and the bezel itself is a bit wider, so it's going to overhang the case slightly more, as you can see. But still beautifully finished, actually nicer finished than this SPB model. But you can see there that the dial, with everything being pushed more outward, it gives everything a little bit more breathing space. And that does make a difference, especially when you consider the fact that you're getting all of this great texturing. It might have felt a little bit crowded if they would have kept it a little closer to this scale, where the indices are pushed a little bit more centralized. And then basically you have, of course, that outer track there. Here, you're getting a nice sloped chaptering, and a well-aligned one at that. So very, very cool. And of course, this is one of the older releases before they kind of put the extra indice there at the 3, kind of a partial indice, and then they removed the beveled edge there on the date window. Here you're seeing you still have that beautiful beveled edge. So I did want to kind of get these side by side. Another thing to note is that all of these coated steel inserts, the blacked out model has that similar brushed tone. So it, again, is very smart, very matted, very tactical. This definitely has that fantastic tactical vibe. And again, I like that there's so much diversity within these 3. So I did want to kind of bring that in closely there so you guys could kind of get a look. Maybe I'll just leave it off up in the corner here, and then we can recall it whenever we need to. But let's go ahead and just go over some of the dimensions here. 40.1 millimeters in diameter. Let me get that to focus there for you. And since this one is one that I haven't seen too much heavy coverage for online, we'll use this one as kind of the example. So 40.1 and then 13.1 thick with a 47.3 millimeter lug to lug stainless steel, brushed and polished. You're getting the Dia Shield super hard coating, of course. You're getting a beautiful dual curve sapphire there. And it also does have an super clear anti-reflective coating. And you can see even at very harsh angles, you're going to be getting very nice legible viewing. So that is something that I believe is slightly different, let's say, from this model, which costs a bit less there at MSRP around $1,200, but you can get them closer to around $800 from various dealers, particularly in Japan. But you can see that single dome, once you get at an extreme angle, you're going to get a lot more distortion. Luckily, it's just like when you're at the real extremes there, but it is something that's noticeable, and I would have preferred, a double dome just to get that perfect clarity. Now, underwater, it will be less of an issue, but hey, we're not always underwater. So these crystals are just fantastic. And of course, part of that premium cost is getting that beautiful premium sapphire. And then we get into the bezel. These are all pretty much the same actuation, 120 clicks, unidirectional. Ooh. Great loom pip at 12 o'clock, which is a little bit more reminiscent to the original Seiko diver, the 62 MAS. Same goes for that 12 o'clock lume pip there. The 12 o'clock hour pip, I'm sorry, index is singular versus the dual that came, of course, inspired by future models, namely the kind of the daddy of the original Marine Master. So really great bezel action, similar to what you're going to have with that SPB model, where it is a nice balance of both smooth and tactile clickiness. And of course, the engagement with that is very nice because of the high level of finish on these grips. The crowns all screw down, but they are unsigned, and that is kind of typical, within the Prospex line. There are some special units that do have signed crowns, but typically within the Prospex line, you shouldn't expect a signed crown. That is relegated to more of the Presage line, which are going to be dressier watches, which don't screw down, so you can of course align everything as needed. Now, although you can't see it, these do have the great 8L35 movement, which has a 50-hour power reserve, has that 4 hertz beat rate at 800 vibrations per hour, and have tolerances of -10 to +15 seconds per day. But typically, people who have 8L movements really report, chronometer-like performance. Typically, I mean, geez, out of a 6L movement, I'm getting chronometer-like performance. So the 8L again is just a higher standard, higher frequency. So it's going to be that more reliable. It would have been nice if they would have been regulated like you get with a Grand Seiko, but then again, a Grand Seiko does cost a bit more. Also, the 9S movement, the modern 9S movement anyway, will give you about 72 hours of power reserve, versus here you're going to be only getting the 50-hour power reserve, which is still pretty nice. But man, that is a looker. The blues on here, I mean, you guys know Seiko's catalog stock footage is never good. It doesn't do these watches justice. But what I'll do here is go ahead and try this on, and you can see it again. It wears very similarly to that SPB, and these really nice silicone straps, just very well designed. Another huge thing that's amazing, 20 millimeter lugs with drilled lugs. So 20 millimeter lugs, that's fantastic. You're getting 20 millimeter lugs here as well, but the previous SLA models, like some of the High Beat and the Ever Brilliant, more reissue style 62 MAS watches have had 19 millimeter lugs. So with that 20 millimeter lug, even if you don't like the strap, you have a lot more options for you in terms of if you want to throw it on a Tropic rubber, or an ISO frame, or anything really. You can throw it on a leather if you want. A lot of people will be upset by that, but at the end of the day, it's you wearing the watch, and man, this thing wears fantastic. So we'll go ahead and move this off to the side here, and we'll just bring the camera, we'll tighten the shot up so you guys can get a nice idea of how this is going to lay with less, of course, lens distortion, as if I was to just bring that up. And man, that is a good looking watch. And I will say it definitely kind of won me over. I mean, all of these really, just because the stock photos are so bad on Seiko's site, but seeing these in the metal, they're really outstanding. You see, of course, that beautiful metal keeper there that does have multi-finishing, beautiful milled tang buckle, and then tons of adjustment / ventilation that's also available. So really fantastic, guys. So did I mention, let's just get into the details of these dials as well. And this one having a slightly different dial, but they all do feature textured dials. They all feature the date window at 3 o'clock, nicely beveled. This actually has like the super Luma Bright, so this one has a bit more longevity and slightly more punch on that initial illumination. But they all pretty much have a similar formula for these dials. You got raised indices, that unique texturing that is going to be unique specifically for here, versus there they have kind of the same texturing but different colorways. You're getting these cool multi-finish hands, brushed and polished. You're also getting, this stuff is kind of gunmetal metalled out in terms of the hands and the surrounds, which does keep this nice and sedate and very tactical. It does, of course, as you can see, divers 200 meters, which means it is ISO compliant and all the way up to the newest standard because you do have that smaller pip. The nice thing is this pip doesn't feel out of place because all of the indices are pushed out further, so everything aligns, versus in some other watches, unfortunately, they really, I mean, even on the newer Marine Masters, they've cut out into the chaptering and kind of shoehorned it in, so it feels unnatural. This definitely very natural, very flowing, as you guys can see. So that is, it's very nice. Like, it doesn't look bad at all, and you're still getting that beautiful beveled date window. Here you're getting the color match. On these two, you're going to be getting, of course, the contrasting date window for balance. And I think these look really, really great. And of course, these are all ISO compliant, 20 millimeter lugs. Again, I can't stress enough how awesome that is. And then that 8L movement just rocks. So with that said, let's actually get everything laid out for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, really fantastic loom, glowing very brightly. You may or may not be able to see a slight difference in kind of that more jacked up night vision loom there, but it was really more so a case of longevity. But one thing you might notice is that the dial on the golden model, the 66, does capture a little bit more ambient lighting and reflects off of that dial a bit more. So you can see here, of course, I do like to work in some, low light transition within these loom shots because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, maybe spending some time in your favorite automobile, etc. So, it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. What do these blues look like? What do these reflective bezels or brushed bezels, how do they negotiate different types of reflections? And you can see that blacked out model, the 6-7, just stays quite dark. It does a great job of that stealth vibe, while you're going to get a ton more play on that center gold model, the 6.6, and then the 6.5 gives you the typical blue dial diver vibes, just playing with that lighting, really focusing on the sunray pattern, as well as some of that reflectivity off of that great coated bezel insert. And then, we can get into some harsher lighting conditions that might typically expose any type of production defects, but it's not like there's a lot of bracelet or anything for you to look at in terms of brushing and how uniform the light glides over it. But you can see really nice here, nice luster in that Zaratsu polishing, as well as that nice, brushing texture there is really, really clean. So these do definitely feel more premium and more expensive. It's not just the price tag. You did get the better movement. I wish Seiko would put this movement in even more watches, but it's not a cheap movement, at least in terms of the tiering class. There's they did a reissue, kind of reimagining of the Willard and that adventure, the Umari, I believe, Umari edition. And those were really, really cool. We reviewed those on the channels as well, thanks to Belmont watches. And those were kind of within that bargain space in terms of giving you a cheaper option to the Willard reissue. You get the reimagining. So this is a similar vein. You're getting a 62 MAS reimagining, recreation versus just a flat out reissue. And you're getting a lot of diversity. So closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist. These wear a lot like my SPB 143, but may appear visually larger due to that more spacious dial opening. Now, in terms of these model variations, of course, you have the 6.5, 6.6, and 6.7. And you can, if you want to get lost in those references, hey, you can see that the dates are set accordingly as a little cheat sheet. And then in terms of comparable models at these prices, they slot well above the SPB line, right? Which is around $1,200 to $15. I'm sorry, $1,200 to $1,500. But in terms of SLA models, these are more on the entry side of at the SLA range. Part of it probably being that they don't have metal bracelets. But in terms of where that falls in with the rest of the market, you know, this falls within kind of the mainstream mid-tier likes of the Tag Heuer Aqua Racer, and it's probably only about $1,000 shy or so from the Enthusiast Darling Black Bay line, which now do have in-house movements as well. So that's something to definitely consider. Do I think a lot of people will be shopping these against things like the Black Bay? I don't think so. And against Tag Heuer, maybe. It just depends, because honestly, Seiko is doing such a great job in terms of its marketing as of late that they are even getting a lot more name recognition, although they've always had the horological significance and, you know, all of these, you know, great historical moments within, you know, the sports watch space in general, and especially dive watches. They've always had that kind of street cred, but now it's becoming more mainstream. You're seeing the explosion of the Seiko 5 brand with Grand Seiko. So there's a lot more name recognition for Seikos these days, which is nice. It's tough though, because of course, with more demand, becomes more higher prices. You can't necessarily get those super great deals. You can still get good ones, of course. Here you can get a nice one from the team over at Belmont Watches, because these are limited watches. A lot of places, when it comes to limited editions, will just automatically kind of start jacking up the prices. Here it's nice that you can get something a little bit lower, and you can add it to the cart, or maybe you can email or call in and ask any questions if you do have any, and maybe try to get a bargain going. So for me, guys, the bottom line is these are great. I'd say two good scenarios for those who might be interested in these, or either folks that are already accustomed to entry-level luxury and maybe are looking for something a bit more nostalgic with a premium build. Of course, this definitely has a very premium build, or it could be something like an attainable grail for someone who normally kind of stays at or around or beneath that $1,000 watch kind of mark. So if you're within that market and you love the Turtle, the SKX, stuff like that, a couple different cocktail times, the Alpinist. If you're a collector like that, like one of these could easily be kind of that grail level piece that is quite attainable, especially when you're getting it at a discount. But yeah, I mean, these are going to be basically under $3,000. Once you get above that, you start getting in Marine Master territory. And honestly, Marine Masters can be a bit polarizing because of their very odd proportions. They are beautiful and desirable watches, but they're just not the most versatile. These definitely are going to be a lot more versatile by comparison, even with kind of the eccentric dial layouts. I think they did choose some really cool colorways to really kind of balance out this release, this kind of trifecta of divers. So, in terms of pricing, personally, I'm a lot more comfortable staying, at or around that $3,000 threshold. And I do feel more comfortable owning, let's say by comparison, I would rather own three $3,000 watches versus one $9,000 watch. And even though that's about the same amount of investment in the end, there is something to be said about wearing a tool watch and not worrying about it like it's some huge collector's piece. And yeah, for some, this could be a vault type of watch that you'd want to baby. But for others, this might just be a really nice watch that you're going to go wear and go have some fun with. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.